The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gala webinar series. My name is Manuela Noske, and I'm the Communications Manager at Gala. Gala is a global nonprofit trade association that enables communication and business across languages and cultures. We're headquartered in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. Today, Francesca DiMarco from Pinterest is going to talk to us about sentiment analysis and how you can use sentiment analysis to advocate for global users. But before we get to our topic, I need to go over our housekeeping items. Everyone's lines are muted to cut down on any noise. If you have any technical difficulties, let me know by using your chat box, and I will work with you to troubleshoot them. If you have a slow internet connection, your audio may be disrupted. If that happens, use the number listed on the GoToWebinar panel to call in using your phone. We are making a recording of this presentation, and you will be able to find it following the presentation on Gala's global website. All participants will receive a link by email. If you have any questions or comments, please type them into your chat box. I will keep an eye on those questions, and if appropriate, I'll interrupt Francesca during the presentation, but if it's a meatier or longer question, we'll wait until the end of the presentation to post it. Next, let me introduce Francesca. Francesca DiMarco leads the localization program at Pinterest. She's been in the localization industry for 15 years, covering different functions. At Pinterest, Francesca implemented successful translation and transcreation processes, achieved significant quality improvements aligning voice and tone across product, marketing, and regional offices. She's passionate about automation, team structure, and evangelization. She's a former academic on the history of Japan, and she lectured at Stanford University in the UK and in Italy. In her spare time, she's making a documentary on Hiroshima survivors. And now, without any further ado, Francesca, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Manuela, and thank you for the kind introduction. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, User Sentiment Analysis. I'm really excited to be here. This talk is going to discuss how to build a program around sentiment analysis for international markets, how to capitalize on their feedback to advocate for global users with developers, with dev teams. I will also deep dive into how to ensure that the sentiment analysis program is carefully built with international in mind. So which strategies can enable international users to share their sentiment in a constructive way, which tools and dashboards can help us listen attentively to international user sentiment, but also how to automatically collate feedback and who should analyze the data and how we should make that data actionable for developers. So we have quite a lot to go through. First off, I want to say just a little bit about myself. Thanks, Manuela, again for the introduction. I work at Pinterest. I've been at Pinterest for 3.5 years, and I use Pinterest primarily for planning activities for my kids, for tips, and for my outfit. Recently, my team is also in charge of providing dev teams with insights coming from international folks. And so I had to quickly ramp up on what this means, what a sentiment analysis is, and how to do it for our users at Pinterest. And this is the reason why this webinar today. I would like to share with you what I learned and what I still need to learn. I have prepared a lot of content, but I want this to be interactive. So as Manuela mentioned, please feel free to ask questions, interrupt. We can have some dialogue. It's always like kind of hard to go back 20 slides when the Q&A session arrives. So after this seminar, you will have a good idea on the following topics. Number one, why the sentiment analysis? So we're going to identify the reasons why the sentiment analysis can be of a good use, especially like in companies like Pinterest or tech companies in general. Two, how many different analyses are out there? And three, who's the audience? Who are we writing a sentiment analysis for? How to collect data. So we're going to identify data set, to include in the sentiment analysis or to check against the sentiment analysis to ensure that inbound feedback matches the dashboards. And then how to make it actionable for the largest number of teams within a company. What are the common missteps? And I'm going to share, some of those secrets with you as well. And then I'll leave time for Q&A. So let's begin. Why sentiment analysis? First of all, let me define sentiment analysis, which is the interpretation and classification of emotions, might be positive, negative, or neutral, that are expressed within a text data, and it uses text analysis techniques. So it allows businesses like ours to identify customer sentiment towards a product, a brand, a feature, and they usually can do it online in conversations, so they can provide feedback offline that is collated down on a site by a company. The sentiment analysis is applied nowadays across a number of businesses. Just to give you an example, in 2012, the Obama administration used sentiment analysis to gauge public opinion to policy announcements and campaign messages ahead of the presidential election. So this is how widespread the sentiment analysis is. And why? Because being able to quickly see the sentiment behind everything from forum posts to new articles means being able to better strategize and plan for the future. What we want to know is how comfortable our users around the world with our product. Do they feel welcomed? Do they trust our ability to cater to their needs? And what happens when that feedback needs to be tracked across multiple markets? Because that's a challenge that we are currently facing. As a company, Pinterest has a mission to bring everyone the inspiration to create a life they love. And my team, Localization team, focuses especially on that everyone part. So no matter what country the users live in, what language they speak, or which device they use, we want to ensure that everyone finds inspiration on Pinterest. So our responsibility as a localization team is to ensure that this huge chunk of population is represented in the sentiment analysis. At Pinterest, globally, we reach 400 million active users. Over 65% of our user base are from outside of the US, so you can imagine how big this data set is going to be. And these users live in over 200 countries and territories. So it's really exciting to think about how the products that we're building here impact millions of people all around the world. Can you imagine the huge volumes of text data, email support? Sorry, Manuela, were you say something?
No, it's not me. The noise must be coming from somewhere. Let me take care of that.
So having seen those numbers, can you imagine how big the volumes of email support tickets, chats, social media conversations, surveys, articles, documents, etc., is created every day? And on top of that, in 34 languages, which is the number of languages that Pinterest supports at the moment, and in 200 territories, which are the territories that we serve at the moment. So it's really hard to analyze, to understand sentiment analysis, but also to sort through the sentiment analysis that is coming from our users. Not to mention that it's very time consuming and it's very expensive. Sentiment analysis, however, helps make sense of all this unstructured text that we get every day. It is important to do it in a structured and systematic way, and I'm going to tell you how. So how many different sentiment analyses are out there? Sentiment analysis modules focus on polarity, so positive, negative, or neutral. But it also focuses on the feelings and emotions. So, for example, anger, happiness, sadness, or even on intentions. I'm interested versus I'm not interested in your feature, in buying your product, and so on. So these are some of the most popular types of sentiment analysis, and I'm going to present four. The first one is the multilingual one, which is, of course, the one that we use all the time at Pinterest. The multilingual sentiment analysis detects language in texts in an automated way. Thanks to a language classifier or a language detection system. And then it trains a custom sentiment analysis model to classify text in the language of the choice. So we have 34 languages, and here I would like to highlight the fact that we're talking about languages and not market. So I might classify sentiment for Spanish, but I am not aware at that point from which market that Spanish is coming from. Another type of sentiment analysis is the fine-grained one, which is it's based on polarity and it's based on precision. So it can be a sentiment can be very positive, neutral, negative, or very negative. So imagine that the 5-star ratings on Yelp, for example, or on the App Store in a review is a fine-grained model. This is a perfect example, and usually it refers to like 5 stars refer to very positive and 1 star to very negative. This analysis is very easy because it narrows down a general good, bad, neutral response to the, for example, for marketing campaigns or for a product. Still, there is so much more information in the form of unstructured data that we get every day from our users, and so it's worth to understand how to capture that data in other ways. There is another sentiment analysis which is called emotion. This type of sentiment analysis aims at detecting emotions like, as I mentioned before, happiness or frustration, anger, sadness, and so on. And many emotion detection systems use lexicons. So, for example, lists of words and the emotions that they convey. Or they use a complex machine learning algorithms. But usually an emotion analysis uses a rule-based system. This is a set of human-crafted rules to help identify polarity, so good, neutral, not good. But also it leverages very developed computational linguistic techniques to understand the sentiment. So, for example, they're using stemming or tokenization, a part of a speech tagging or parsing, and they allow us to define 2 lists of polarized words. And when the list of the positive words is bigger than the list of the negative words, the system will come up with a positive review. Or the system looks at lexicons. So the list of words and expressions within a sentence, within a text, and if the number of positive words is greater than the number of negative words, again, the system will come up with a positive sentiment. Of course, one of the downsides of using lexicon is that people express emotions in different ways. Some words that typically express anger, like bad or kill, can be positive. So imagine our sentiment analysis reviews showed that someone wrote, "Your product is so bad," which is different from "Your customer support is killing me." Sorry, "Your product is so bad," which is different from "I want your product so bad." Or "Your customer support is killing me" is different from "You are killing it." So these rule-based systems are naive in a certain sense because they don't take into account how words are combined in a sequence, or even more than that, they don't get sarcasm, which is a tool that usually users use when they're very, very frustrated. "Did you enjoy the sign-up flow on Pinterest?" "Yeah, sure, so smooth." And we probably will get a positive sentiment from the system, from the emotion system sentiment analysis. The last one is an aspect-based, which is very similar in some sense. The aspect-based sentiment analysis usually analyzes sentiments of text on product reviews. So if you want to know which particular aspects or features people are mentioning in a positive, neutral, or negative way, you would use an aspect-based review. That's where aspect-based sentiment analysis can help. For example, in a text like, "Your skin tone filter Pinterest is really bad." So I know that users are not talking are not frustrated with our product in general, but they're frustrated with a specific feature of our product. And so I know exactly what's the part of my product that I need to address. The aspect-based sentiment analysis uses the same technique of the emotion one. So these are the four most popular ways of analyzing sentiment. But of course, a more advanced processing techniques can be used, and new rules added to support new expressions and vocabulary. This is a hybrid system that combines both rule-based and automated approaches. And I will tell you more about this in a minute. So who's the audience? Who am I consolidating a sentiment analysis for? Sentiment analysis models can help you immediately identify critical issues in real time, right? So you can take action right away. But who's interested in that? And a bunch of teams are actually interested in getting to know right away sentiment from our users. One is product teams, marketing teams, brand teams, and research. Product teams are the main stakeholders. Usually, like they're the ones launching new features or launching enhancements of existing features, and they want to hear from users right away. Marketing teams are very curious to understand what their goal is to monitor social media channels, because it allows us to gain an overview of the wider public opinion behind certain topics. So imagine you launch a new feature today, you would like to keep an eye on social media channels for the rest of the week to understand whether the new product launch was successful or was well received, in order to understand also why good press or bad press was dropped. Brand teams, by using the sentiment analysis on social media, we can also get incredible insights into the quality of conversation that's happening around the brand, and the brand team is particularly interested in getting that message as well. And the research team, of course, the sentiment analysis for the research team is an essential part of their work, because it's important, it's crucial for research to understand the customer service approach, the market research, to understand exactly how people think on our own products and services. And so you can see what they think about your competitors too, for example. So thanks to these meaningful interactions with customers on social media channels and so on, we can track trends over time to share with our teams, and we can keep a finger on the competition as well. Can you imagine now that you have a good overview on what's the data that we are collecting and who are the teams that we are serving? Can you imagine how powerful sentiment analysis is when we discuss an international roadmap, for example, with dev teams? When we know what's the sentiment of our users, and in all the territories that we cover, and in all the locales that we cover, and we know what are their needs, we know what are their requests, and the requests are not just coming from one market, but they're coming from millions of users around the world. So imagine how valuable this tool is. How are we going to collect data? And this part of the presentation, now we're shifting into a more tactical phase. So how many tools? There are many tools available. What are the tools that I'm going to use, but also how am I going to collect this data? So the key part of mastering sentiment analysis is working on different data sets, but also experimenting a little bit with different approaches. So it's not like you create a template for your sentiment analysis and you go with it for the rest of the year. So first you need to get your hands-on data, procure a data set which we'll use to carry out your experiments. And I'll tell you what we do over here. So at Pinterest, first, what we do is we do a sentiment and product reviews. So this data set consists of a few million customer reviews with star ratings. It's super useful for training a sentiment analysis tool. So we use App Store, Play Store, App Annie, and we check product reviews. The report is sliced by platform, by sentiment and by locale. So imagine how powerful it is to see a trend over time of a specific market sentiment based on how we are doing in that market and just in that market on a specific platform and a specific language. So imagine how we're doing in Brazil with checking the feedback that we get in Portuguese for Brazil on iOS, for example, and I'm looking just at the positive reviews or at the negative reviews, and I know exactly what I need to address next in order to gather exactly what the needs of our Brazilian users are. Then what we do here at Pinterest is also, we look at social channels. The tool takes all the words and phrases that imply positive and negative sentiment and apply rules that consider how context might affect the tone of that content. So there are some crafty rules, some ad hoc rules that help the software know that a sentence is positive or negative. For example, I want the dark mode so bad, which is a feature that Pinterest offers. Or I just tried the dark mode, it was so bad. And those are two different sentiments that our tool is able to detect. Next step is working on a more detailed analysis that looks at emotions, of course, so including happiness or anger, and this reveals even more context to the conversation happening around a brand or a feature. So again, imagine how comprehensive the visualization of international markets and their emotions can be when we have a conversation with dev teams. And lastly, what we do here at Pinterest is we look at bugs. So we look at the App Store, Google Store, at social channels, and pretty much within a few hours, we are able to track bugs that have been flagged in the 200 territories that we serve. And we redirect those bugs directly to the dev teams or to a bug triage, and so they can be addressed right away, rather than, being reactive with those bugs after a couple of weeks. So we can actually intervene right away within just a couple of hours. This is a snapshot, and it's intentionally blurry. This is a snapshot of the data that we collect. This is just to give you an idea of what we see every day. And this is not only a real-time insight, this is also an actionable dashboard, because basically we can sort when we get flagged that there is a bug impacting a certain market or a certain language or a certain geographical area. We can sort by language, by country, by users, by device, by build of that device, and make sure that the bug gets immediately rerouted to the team for a fix. And this is a product quality trend, and this is where we want to see results over time. So we're looking at, for example, 3 months here, and we want to see how well we're doing in terms of a time of response for our international markets when a bug arises in our product. And this is how we click on one bug, get all the reports, distribute by market and language, and send an auto notification to the engineering team to fix a bug. And also, bug categories are not static, and this is very crucial for us. Bug categories are not pre-created, but they're dynamic. So imagine that you're dealing with language, with data that can be created based on natural language and every day. So basically, you can generate. The tool generates queries, and we can generate queries as well, and create new categories using synonyms, also in language for international markets or for new features that we're launching right now. So they didn't exist previously, and now by creating that query, we're basically generating a new jargon or generating a new language for the tool to pick. How to make the sentiment analysis actionable. So customer feedback is great, and tech companies are data-driven companies, but how do we turn, and so we tend to collect a lot of data, but how do we turn that feedback and that data into meaningful users' insights? How do we make sure that our teams listen and tailor products and features to meet those needs? So it's very important to focus on how to make these results interpretable and actionable. Number one, the data isn't as memorable as stories. I think we know there is a lot of data showing that only 5% in an audience of 100 people, 5 will remember the statistics, whereas 63 people will remember the story, and the rest of the people won't remember anything. So it is important, it is crucial to build a story, because stories create a connection with the audience, and our audience are our dev teams. And stories increase attention and increase empathy. And stories open up to the audience to change, which is more often than not the goal of our presentation, the goal of why we're having that interaction with the teams. For example, imagine that we have data showing that we got good reviews for 2 months in a row across the board. It can be presented as in, for the first time in our company's history, 1-star reviews on the App Store compared to the prior month decreased over all markets. So what happened? Creating a story can actually engage our user and engage our teams into that conversation, and can open that audience to change. And also the way we create data, the way we collect data clearly defines actions, and that needs to be, and that's the crucial part. So usually in a sentiment analysis, we highlight what are the next steps, and we call out teams. For example, we haven't seen an increase in positive sentiment after we launched this feature. As such, we recommend that this team follows the, or consider the following suggestions or the following advice. And we need to be very sensitive and consider our audience, what are the goals and priorities for the teams we're writing this report to? What are their expectations? Are they expecting good news, bad news, or another boring meeting that doesn't help push the company forward? So what is their familiarity with international markets, but also what is their seniority level? So how much authority do they have in taking a decision? And so once we collect these sentiment analysis, we distribute it across the largest number of teams, and then we always ask for feedback on our report. We want to fine-tune and repeat. As I mentioned before, a sentiment analysis is it's not something that you create on a template and that's good to go for a year. Something that you want to put your hands on and fine-tune over and over. So it is important to ask feedback to stakeholders to understand what's exactly needed. And I'm going to share a little bit about some missteps. So the sentiment analysis is not a perfect science at all. And there are some common missteps that I've been noticing throughout the time. Number one, tools are error prone. And this is because the human language is super complex. So teaching a machine to analyze the various grammatical nuances, cultural variations, slang, misspellings that occur in online mentions is a very difficult process. And teaching a machine to understand how context can affect tone is even more difficult. As with any automated process, the tool is prone to errors and often needs a human eye to watch over it. So we need a more sophisticated, multidimensional scale of this process. Two, data sets can be too large. And true that we want a large data set. We want to examine millions of tweets, but the millions of tweets are going to overshadow the concerns about reliability at a granular level, for example, of a single tweet that might be very insightful, maybe more insightful than hundreds out there. And then the other common misstep is subjectivity and culture, of course. Unlike factual information, opinions and sentiments have a very important characteristic, that is, they are subjective, and also it's subjective the way they are expressed, and it's subjective the way, and it's subjective also based on the culture that produced that sentiment. So it is important to examine a collection of opinions from many people rather than one single opinion from one person, because such an opinion represents also the subjectivity view of that single person. But it's important also to keep in mind that there are cultures or there are markets that can express those feelings and that subjectivity in a very different way. One example is Japan. Like sometimes we notice that Japan, despite the ratio of the sentiment expressed by Japanese users is much lower than the sentiment expressed by other markets, which means that for every million users, we get 10% of sentiment expressed by other markets and maybe 1% or 0.5% from Japan. And that's because users are less inclined to share their sentiment, especially when it's negative. And so these are things that we should consider, like culture and subjectivity, when we look at a large set of data. So yeah, these are common missteps that we've been seeing over time. And let me wrap up so I leave some time for questions as well. So why the sentiment analysis? First off, it saves time and effort because the process is fully automated. And second, it's a tool that become actionable. We have pieces of information that are that can dictate actionability across teams within a company, and they're useful in numerous areas of business and research. And lastly, sentiment analysis tools are becoming smarter every day, and the more we are feeding them with data, the smarter and more accurate they become in sentiment extraction. So these are the reasons why our companies are using sentiment analysis, and this is the reason why each company will have to tailor the way they build this data set together and pull these tools together. This is all from my side, and I'm happy to open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Francesca. This was really insightful and really interesting. Thank you for preparing. We do have a couple of questions. Let me start with this one here. Did you build the sentiment analysis tool in-house, or did you use an external service? And do you use a disambiguation rules that are custom built at the local level?
The answers are no and yes. So we use a tool that was not built in-house. So we're using actually multiple tools that are not built in-house, but they get customized. The more we use it, the more they get customized. So we can enhance existing functionalities according to our needs. And that's and we reckon that that was the best fit for our business needs, like getting a tool that is existing and then like molding it into a way that makes sense for us and for our business. The second question was, can you repeat it again?
Whether you're using disambiguation rules that are custom built to the locale level.
Yes, we do, and it's still like the way disambiguation works is still a bit simplistic, and so. But again, like these are things that there is a degree of interaction between the tool and who manages the tool that is super important. And the longer that interaction, the better the results you get in terms of disambiguation as well when it comes to locales.
Yeah. We have one follow-up question. I'm not sure that you can share, but can you share which industry tool you are actually leveraging, if that is okay with Pinterest?
Yeah. I don't feel comfortable in sharing the tools that we're using at the moment, but there are so many out there, and my recommendation is really to look at features and functionality and how they meet your business needs.
Yeah.
Because each company, each business is looking at a different side of a different aspect of the sentiment. There are tools with a lot of bells and whistles, and there are others that are more, like simple and straightforward. So it really depends on what are the business needs.
Yeah, totally. And we don't want to endorse any particular solutions. So thank you for that. We have one question here around which platforms you collect data from and how and if those differ from market to market. I wonder if you can go into that a little bit.
We collect data pretty much in a very consistent way across the board. So in each market, Pinterest support iOS, Android, and web, and we collect data from all these platforms and across all markets. So all markets are supported in all these platforms.
The same way.
So the data is very consistent in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thank you. Now we got a couple of questions here that relate to localization, and I think they're getting into the same thing, and that is, can you in any way directly connect the sentiment analysis with translation improvements? Like how actionable is the feedback that you're getting? Have you ever updated a translation because of the data that you received?
Yes, the answer is yes. So we have a tool in place that is measuring also the effectiveness of our help center. So our help center gets a huge number of visits every day from international markets. And we have a tool that is measuring how effective our answers through the help center are for our users across in the world. And we can catch when there is an issue tied to translation, meaning that sometimes these articles are not effective, or they can be effective in English, but they're not effective in international, in the localized copies. And so when we connect the dots, we get exactly to the point that probably the translation or the suspect that the translation was not the best. And so there are a lot of instances in which we went back and fixed the translation because we got these insights from the data that we pull.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you for that. Question about markets and language detection. So isn't it, you mentioned that you detect at the broad level, so it's Spanish, but you don't know if it's Mexico or Argentina. Isn't it crucially important for you to understand not only what market feedback comes from, but also what segment within the market? You gave a couple of examples around the context. So your customer service is killing me is negative, whereas you're killing it is a positive sentiment. The meaning of words differs from market to market as well. So an example that comes to my mind is while the adjective mean in New Zealand English means the same thing in US English, when the indigenous population, the Maori of New Zealand, use it, for them it means something very different. It means cool and hip. Don't you need to know that in order to understand? Or is such detail just simply not important for the scale of what you're doing?
It is important to, that's a great question. It is important to get the language variant right, and also to get the market. Because the combination will give us a better idea on the way people communicate, what's the jargon, what's the language that they use. And of course, there are tools that are perfect for those needs. The other thing that we need to consider is that there is a lot of jargon there, and in particular, I think that Twitter is one of the most challenging social media to analyze because of the character limitation. And so most of the times we see that the jargon coming from Twitter is the trickiest one to identify a meaning for, or to associate to a sentiment to. So it is true that it is important to understand the language variant, which is something that tools can definitely detect, and then to understand, and usually like the language detection is tied to the market. if we know that this sentiment is coming from an IP that is in New Zealand and they're using English, most probably it's the English UK or New Zealand kind of thing. And we know also what the language that they're using, but most of the time we're also building like a sort of the tool is creating a sort of glossary, internal glossary per language because of the jargon that is used by users these days.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Let's maybe talk a little bit about the role of the localization team within Pinterest. And there's really two questions. And one of them is, why is the localization team concerning itself with sentiment analysis? And then the second, I'll repeat it later, is like, do you feel that PMs and marketing people are really eager to include the results of your analysis into the services, or do you have to constantly push them? So why is it with the loc team? And then how are they just knocking on your door all the time asking what are the results, or do you have to advocate strongly for them considering the results of your sentiment analysis?
Yeah, great questions. Let me start from the second one. The process of education and evangelization with dev teams is constant, so it's endless. And these conversations, these interactions happen always and along the way. But it's also important to be informed, and that piece of information is something that our team is collecting, and they do not know, but they do value. Sentiment analysis is providing them with feedback of a number of markets. As I mentioned before, at Pinterest, we have 65% of our users are coming from outside of the US. So more than half of our business is actually outside of the US. It is extremely important to understand what's going on out there. So usually, like, the conversations are held systematically, constantly, along with evangelization. But what I noticed throughout the time is that when we quantify that sentiment for about international users and present it to our dev teams, that data is very impactful and can really talk straight in a very straightforward way to a dev team, to a PM, to a marketing manager, for example. I'm going to give you an example just for the sake of the argument. I'm not going to name the feature, but there was a request internationally about a certain feature that we didn't have available. Mainly, for a year, we received feedback from international users about the need of having that feature available on our product. And it takes time to socialize with dev teams that's a need, and that our users are asking for it, and they're asking again month over month and quarter over quarter, and by the end of the year we have that feature developed for us. So of course we need to advocate for our international users, and as part of the international team, it is our biggest responsibility, the one to open the floor to those conversations, to that interaction with dev teams, marketing teams, and so on all the time. So that conversation is constant. But it's also important to quantify to have a quantitative and very substantial data to present to the teams, because we're speaking the same language in that sense. And going to the first question, which is about localization, we, as I mentioned before, at Pinterest, part of our mission is to focus on that everybody, and the localization team, and we are part of the globalization services team at Pinterest. We care about that everybody, and so we are not only localizing, but we are adapting content for international markets. And when we adapt content, we change and update layouts, iconography. So we don't just translate, we swap images, we take a clear a clear stance in terms of what's the imagery that we're putting out there, and we want to know what's the sentiment of our users, and that's the major reason why we are collecting a sentiment for international markets.
Great, thank you. I think we're coming slowly towards the end, but I'd like to ask you two more questions. In our pre-discussion, we talked about, the magic wand. If you had a magic wand, what would you change or add on to the program that you have? But I would love to ask, in addition to that, what's next? I mean, you've put this together. This is a great program. You're actually getting really key insights, it seems, into how your international users feel. Where are you taking this next?
It At the moment we're using. If I had a magic wand, I would try to simplify the way we collect data. Data is pulled from different directions and from different tools. It would be amazing to have this magic dashboard that is pulling data from all these tools and giving me exactly what I need, but it takes time and it takes a lot of human interaction as well with the tools. And so, yeah, it's a journey, and we just started.
Mm-hmm. And remind us, how long ago did you kick off this program? When?
We've been having this program at Pinterest for a long time now, okay. for years, but we have been working with additional tools very recently, probably from 6 months ago. We've been using a new number of tools.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thank you. If people want to stay current on what's going on with sentiment analysis or just go deeper and learn about it, what groups would you recommend that they join? What should they be reading? Where should they be looking? Do you have any recommendations for our participants?
Nothing in particular. I feel like soft readings are always helpful, but also I think it's interesting to talk to different providers, like sentiment analysis tools that provide sentiment analysis are have their own, help center and so on. So really like digging into the what's possible and what not, what are the features available out there. It will be already a good starting point to, to deep dive into a sentiment analysis and how to build the program around that.
Good, thank you. Thank you so much. I think that is all the questions that we have today. Francesco, thanks for educating us about how to gather and conduct an analysis of user sentiment specifically for international markets, and how to get those insights, and actually then apply them in a meaningful way. And another big thank you to our audience for joining us today and for asking questions. We would really appreciate it if you could just give us a minute of your time and provide feedback on today's session using the post-event survey. So we want to get your sentiments about the session. Survey is super short, but your perspectives, as always, help us to continue to refine our webinar program. And with that, Francesca and I are in the same time zones. I wish you a good day, and I wish a lot of you a good evening as well. Thank you so much, and hope to see you at another Gala webinar soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.